Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Hooked on Hoops, brought to you by Nothing But Net and Triple Threat Collectibles. I am your co-host, Patrick Pratt. Alongside me in studio is my co-host, Dinos Trigonis. And we also have in studio Ball is Life editor, Ronnie Flores. Also on the Zoom, we have former Division I college basketball coach and ESPN analyst Fran Fraschilla. We also have former Division I basketball coach and ESPN analyst Seth Greenberg. And we also have longtime high school basketball scout and writer Van Coleman.
The NCAA, honestly, as we look back on it all, should have got their arms around this about 20 years ago. The kids should have started to get, when the money got bigger and bigger, there were so many different ways we could have handled this. Stipends, put money in escrow so that after 4 years, they walk away from a college degree. And if they played pro ball, great, but maybe they had 100 or 200 or 300 grand in the bank. Two words that have gone obsolete. I haven't heard these words in 3 years. Graduation rates out the window. Nobody cares about them anymore. I blame the NCAA mainly because they never really got their arms around this problem. We had some feckless people that didn't do their jobs. We're greedy. The TV networks are greedy. The conferences are greedy. The NCAA was greedy. And now we've turned the whole situation on its head, because rather than us controlling the sport, the student athletes control the sport right now. And I don't see how the genie goes back in the bottle unless maybe we do need federal legislation. We'll have to see how this all shakes out with the court case that's ongoing right now.
Yeah, Fran, you're definitely right about that. Like you said, about 20 years ago, I think the public tide turned to say, hey, this money's real big. You know, the student athlete should get, a fair portion or equitable portion. As far as it turning over on itself, like you said, I don't think, like cops robber game. The robber knows to rob the house in the summer when we're on vacation. We're not going to go back. That's as months and years go by. It's not going to completely go back to genie in the bottle. The kids see the writing on the wall. The schools are allocating $22.3 million or whatever the number is. So there has been money there. So that kind of is a slap in the face to people who have been advocating for the student athlete to do it correctly. It hasn't been done correctly, to your point, and now we're here.
And what's disappointing to see what's going on now is that programs are losing players year by year. I heard Indiana lost their whole team. My guy, Kevin Johnson, head coach at Southern, said he's losing 6 players to the NIL. And Northridge just had a great season. They were exciting. That should be something to build on. They're losing half their team to NIL. So, the lower, like we were talking, Dinos, the mid-majors are might become extinct in a minute.
Well, they're farm teams. They're basically turning into farm teams. Would you agree with that, Fran? They're basically turning into farm teams.
Let's let Seth jump in here on that one. Oh, we can't hear you, Seth. Put your speaker on.
Hey, Solomon, can we get Seth on prematurely or no?
This is the best Seth's ever sounded.
He's on.
Seth, are you on?
Can't hear Seth. Can't hear you.
There he goes.
That worked out. That better.
Hey, Seth, that last 20 seconds when you were talking was the best you've ever sounded.
That was good. That was good. But I keep on getting checks on Thursday, Fran, so it's all good. So, I'm fooling someone. I don't know who I'm fooling, but I'm fooling someone. Look, we can bitch and moan about what happened 20 years ago, and that's not going to solve any problems. So, like, the thing is, you guys just talked about something. We got to be forward thinking. Like you said, APR rates. No, forget about APR rates. People don't talk about education at all. It's not even the equation. You speak to guys, I speak to guys, Fran. And tell me the last coach you spoke to that said that education was even part of the conversation. Because if it is, that's one more than I've talked to. And we've got to figure out a way, to get education back in this picture. Yeah. Look, there's going to be donor fatigue. You can talk about that 20 million all you want. I was at a practice today. They said their school can't afford 20 million across the board, even though they're a very, very high major basketball program. They can't afford $20 million. So, that's a fictitious number. Yeah, if you've got big time college football, you probably can. If you've got a high level conference, you probably can. But if you're not getting big TV money, you don't have that kind of money. So what do you have to do? You got to go find money from the donors, being that's the number that you can get to. So there are so many problems in this thing. Look, we need contracts. Everyone knows that. We need clauses in the contract for retention. We need clauses in the contract for academic progress. We need clauses in the contracts for academic graduation. We need clauses in the contracts for community service, so we can get these guys to have a better understanding that the world doesn't just survive by around them, but talking and blaming the NCAA and what happened 20 years ago, I am so freaking tired of hearing that, because that it happened. It's fucking over with. It's done with. So let's try to think about solutions as opposed to bitching and moaning. Well, if we straightened this out 20 years ago, we'd be in a better place now. You hit it right on. We can't have year-to-year free agency. Because voters are going to get tired of it, fans are going to get tired of it, and everyone else. Nice little office you got set up right there.
Hey, Seth, I think that the key thing here, too, is we got to face the truth in the facts. Nobody wants to face the truth. And the reality is parents don't want to hear this. Players don't want to hear this. But 99% of these players, they're not worth more than a scholarship. They're not. 99%. They're not worth more than a scholarship. And the problem here is we're creating a system where we're letting the bottom, I would guess, half the bottom of a Division I can't compete under this current system. Their only option eventually is going to be to pull the plug. And what that means is 13 scholarship players per team. A lot of them who can't afford to go to college in the first place are not going to have a scholarship. And that's but when I hear people say they're pro player, they're not really pro player. They're pro elite player. I'm pro all the players. If we're going to be pro all players, then we got to have a solution here that takes into account the welfare and the well-being and the interest of all the players of Division I's, and not just the ones that are future NBA players.
That sounds great, but it's always been like when I was at Virginia Tech, Fran, when you were at New Mexico, not everyone in your league always had a level playing field. I agree with you. But, the approach now for mid-major coaches is to treat it like a junior college, to treat it like a prep school. I know I spoke to one guy the other day. He said this exactly what he said. He said, we recruited this guy. We got him cheap. And we told him, if we do our job next year, he'll be $1 million player. And, all those things are great. And you're 100% right. So a lot of these guys, this is the most money they're going to ever see in their lives. And teaching fiscal education is going to be important. But if we don't put education back into the conversation, we're going to have a generation of student athletes that basically we think mental health issues are an issue. When a guy, and Fran, this, when a guy finishes playing and he's making, say, $400,000, $500,000, he's not an NBA player, and he's going overseas for $100,000, and after a month he's not helping that team win, and he gets sent home. Where's that young person going to be mentally if he doesn't have a degree, doesn't have anyone to build a bridge for him to cross to survive the rest of his life? Those are the problems I'm concerned with. I'm not concerned with what happened in the past. We got to get contracts so we can get the portal under control. We got to get contracts so we can find a way to basically get players to actually have somewhere to go back to. Because if you transfer 4 times, let me ask you this, Dino, in your crew, if you transfer 3 and 4 times, Fran, you have a guy to transfer 3 or 4 times and he doesn't graduate yet, where does he go back to? Where's he go back to? Where's his support system?
What does the degree say?
Yeah, he
won't have a degree probably. I mean, Fran, where would if you had a kid and he went for, where would he go back to have that support system?
Well, the saddest part of all, and this is not just NIL, but transfer portal. To me, I'm okay with a one-time transfer. I'm okay with that. Or if your coach leaves, I'm okay with that too. But what we've done is we're creating a generation of student athletes who can't handle adversity and run every time they hit a wall. Exactly. There's something, the coach won't play him, or hey, you're a backup right now. You're only a freshman, but if you keep working, I'll give you a perfect example. I wish everybody in America could watch the Houston Cougars for a year the way I just got a chance to do it, because unfortunately that's old school. You come in, if you're not ready to play, you still get NIL money now. They're still taking care of you. But as far as the playing time, you earn it. And if you earn it enough, you turn into a Sasser, Marcus Sasser, or Grimes, or Shed, which means you turn into an NBA player. But we've lost that ability to overcome adversity because these kids run at every opportunity when it hit the wall.
100%.
Let's talk
100%.
about this. We got a lot of action in Congress with Ted Cruz has proposed legislation down there in Texas in the Senate. He's trying to federalize NIL. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Federalize NIL.
I think it's a good idea if it could be pulled off. I know you sent Dinos me the stuff on Baumgartner, the congressman from up in Spokane. I like that there are people in our government that are seeing that this thing is out of control, and maybe that would be a way to go, except that when we watch the news every night, they get very little done up there. If they could ever get this done and put some guide rails around all of this, transfers, NIL, all the different things that we're talking about, it would be great. I just don't have the confidence. And just to, piggyback on what Seth said, he's absolutely right that we shouldn't go back in time, except that all of these things have been festering to the point now where we've got all these issues that we wish we could have handled. And he's right. Too late to talk about it, what happened then, but we got to have something going on here now. And by the way, these presidents, these conference commissioners, all they give a damn about is making freaking money. And I don't want to hear about graduation rates anymore from them. Now,
another part of that Ted Cruz proposed legislation is an antitrust exemption that will allow the NCAA to regulate, make rules, obviously make transfer rules and other rules. Is that something that I think needs to be done in order to restore some order to this chaos? And
here's the thing, Dinos. There have been rules, and they've been adapted. And that's why if you do contracts and you have buyouts, that solves a lot of the problem. Because if you have real buyouts, just like Fran, you had buyouts in your contract, I had buyouts in my contracts. I don't care who pays them, but before a student athlete is able to compete again, the buyout has to be paid out. And I don't care by who it has to be paid out by. But if we're going to say these guys are pros, which everyone says, which basically then says the academic aspect of it is insignificant. I just go back to, we got to put the student athlete back. I don't know the term student athlete, but we got to educate these young people. We've got to give them a chance to build a bridge to cross when basketball is taken away from them, or the whole thing we should just basically be subsidized by the NBA, and the Power Five conferences will break away, and each one of them will basically have a private equity company that will basically monetize them and put together a budget, and that's the way it's going to be. And that might happen anyway.
Now, if amateurs,
but what's going to hold up in a court of law? And that's all I'd say.
If amateur status has been removed so they can get paid, then why is it still the NCAA? And why are they still under the NCAA?
Do you know what the NCAA does besides legislate? Do you know what it does?
What's that?
It puts on championships. Yeah. That's what they do. They put on championships. The universities buy into it to set some type of rules and regulations and guidelines per se. But in the end, when you say, Fran, the main obligation right now of the NCAA, they put on all these championships, and like a lot of these other championships, Division II, Division III, men's, women's, volleyball, bowling, archery, all those other things, they have to be subsidized. Right? They don't make money.
I want to get can we get Van Coleman in here for a minute? Because I want to turn to a congressman from Spokane, Washington, just introduced some very substantial proposal. He calls it the Restore College Act. Among other things, he wants to replace the NCAA with the American College Sports Association, director appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. He wants a national NIL standard. He wants something that is kind of bizarre for Ronnie Flores, of all people. Time zone restrictions on conference memberships. There's a lot there. There's a lot there to unpack. I know Van's kind of anti-government.
Go ahead, Van.
Well, the whole thing is that those are pretty good starting points. But the thing is, you got to get there. And as Seth just said, it's got to be something that will get through the courts, because this is still going to be a business that's pre-existing business with success is going to still fight to not lose what they have. As you know, it is about the money. And so you're going to have that problem. It may get there. My concern is, and this is the whole thing, I'm with Seth on the educational thing. I think it's 100% needs to get back in, because 99% of those kids are not going to go pro after the time their NIL runs out in college. So we all know that. That's a reality of the life. There's not enough spots even in the world that will make that different when you got 500,000 kids playing college basketball. So it's at all levels. So let's go to the next thing. The thing is, it goes all the way back with me, Seth, to the start of the point of learning to be a player, developing as a player, and learning the disciplines you'd like to see them have when they get to college, because that we used to have. We've lost a lot of that, because this makes it more to the parent about getting to the money than about getting good enough to get the money. And there's a lot of things along the way that, to me, really will destroy this game and go away from college. We'll end up with a European system, which Sonny told me in 1991 that that's what we would eventually have, because of all the things that are going to be wrong as we go forward in the game. He's a prognosticator of the future. I know you don't want to go back, but the reality is he said that this would happen, and he's been fighting against it getting to happen and trying to get this so that it gets there quicker to the kids. And the kids need to be paid, because they have been getting ripped off. We know that for the last 20 years. You're right, 100%. But the thing is, I want to see the education come back into it. Should be part of the contract, because there's a lot of those kids that are going to be there for 3 or 4 years if they're given something to make it worthwhile.
Hey, but Van, it's
a lot. 99% of them need to be there.
It's run every time they want to run.
But Van, we also have to make a distinction. A player at Kansas, in Kentucky, in Oklahoma, in Arizona, is not generating the same revenue as Northern Colorado, Cal State.
100%, I understand that, Dinos.
How do we protect those players from being casualties in this thing?
Well, I think that it is really, the guys have already said how it's going to be. It's going to be a feeder system to a point, but it has to be a controlled feeder system. There was a time when junior college was that feeder system to the 4-year school. Guys that weren't good enough, had some academic problems, other problems outside of court. They went to junior college. They developed and they became big parts of teams as juniors and seniors. I heard one the other day that somebody said that we should have a 2-year junior college for any kid that needs it, and then still have 4 years of eligibility because they've mature enough or they develop enough to be ready to go to the next level. There's a lot of things that go into this, but the integrity of the game is what I don't want to see destroyed. And the game will get destroyed when it gets down to where it's 48 teams that have players and everybody else is gone. And that is a potential. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but
I don't think we'll get. I got to be honest with you, Dinos. I don't think we'll get to that point, because I don't think the NCAA tournament in our lifetime will. I think we'll always have mid majors and low majors and automatic qualifiers. What I think we will do is we'll expand the tournament, and those 1-bid leagues, say the bottom 16 1-bid leagues, there'll be 4 different regions, and they'll play into the main bracket, because let's face it, if you're going to have these monster conferences of 20 and 30 teams, and I love Fran's opinion on this because he calls games in those conferences, they're not going to have 6 teams in the tournament. Mm-hmm. They're just not. But I do think that people have to decide how they want to conduct their business, and there's not enough players for those 50 or 60 organizations anyway. And you know what? They'll be the Yales of the world, and they'll be the Boston Universities, and there'll be teams that, have decided this is how we can conduct our business. And you know what? They'll have a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, play their way to advance to the opening. I don't know what you call it, the opening round or the second round or whatever you want to call it. I don't think that's going to disappear. What's going to disappear is what happened this year. when we get past the first round, which most times anyway, this Cinderella will disappear. And I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. That's just the reality of the world we live in. When I was at Virginia Tech, we didn't have the same budgets and economic situations. We were busing 6 hours to go to Clemson. Duke was flying, 30 minutes to go to Clemson. I mean, our guys, when I took the job, we were pregame meal at Cracker Barrel. I mean, I had to actually change that. So there's no level playing field. You can't legislate a level playing field. You can't legislate the Power Five conferences cutting back. But I think we're going to always have the mid-majors or the low mid-majors, and they're going to decide to do their business another way. You could still have ownership and passion, and some of them are going to be treated as junior colleges, but
they could do similar to what they've done with football, which is where you have the 1AA level,
yeah,
and then maybe let the top 8 out of that get as the play-in type kids in the support, because they might be competitive based on how it comes out. What I want to see is not equity necessarily, but equity and availability of opportunity as far as those levels where they still have something that they can work with to get players into their programs to be in that position of 1AA. And right now, we've kind of lost that. And Fran, go ahead.
I'm going to take a slightly different tact here. I think there's a couple commissioners that would love to do away with low and mid-major. Don't forget, the TV contracts end in the early 30s. And we all love March Madness. And we've said this a million times. They'll never mess with March Madness. And yet we've seen over the last 10 or 20 years in all sports, they will mess with anything. The fact that UCLA and USC are in the Big Ten tells you that they will F up everything that's good. And I think, Seth, I have a feeling, I hope you're right, I have a feeling that some of these conference commissioners would love to have a 72-team superpower conference and screw everybody else, St. Peter's, Ohio U, Long Beach State. I don't think they care, because I think they've proven to be only about one thing, money.
Seth and Fran, this question's for you guys regarding the House settlement, to what we said earlier about education, putting that back in the student athlete a bit. What we haven't said is that the school and the athletes can opt in or out to these settlements. Have you guys heard of anything where any school said, hey, you know what? I'm done with this. We're not going to be part of this $20 million cap. We're just going to, is there any,
some people don't have that money.
Yeah. Well, is there any schools out there that, and again, you don't have to say the school's name, but are people generally, is there some people that are considering that? Say, you know what? I want to be in this arms race. I'm out. We're just going to be college. We're going to offer a few scholarships. We're essentially going to be D3.
Well, they're
D1. I'll follow up.
They'll be D1 AA is what they'll be, Ronnie. Sure. The Ivy League has not opted in, and they won't, because they've already announced it as a league. And we understand why, right? Even though they could probably do NIL better than anybody. Yeah. But I do think, Seth, I do think that I've heard of teams that are not opting in because those schools like Sacred Heart and Fairfield and Manhattan College, and probably 200 others or more can't afford that. No way.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so they're going to become a subdivision or whatever we want to call it.
They have been a subdivision, but they have been a subdivision.
Yeah. They'll be more than minor league.
Unofficial subdivision.
Yeah, like Fairleigh Dickinson. I mean, like you look at the America East or Northeastern Conference, or the MAC, either MAC. To be honest with you, they don't have those funds. I mean, like I said, I mean, there are teams. I'll give you that. I bet Seton Hall, even though they can use that formula, they don't have $20 million. I mean, do they have boosters that can do that through collectives? I don't know, but like if you look at the bottom 16 teams, in the NCAA tournament, they all come from conferences basically that can't afford that, but they're going to still conduct their athletic department. They're going to still try to survive the best way they can. But there's got to be a business model that semi works, or you're going to see what happened at Hartford. They're going to drop to Division III. You can see what happened at St. Francis.
It sounds like all this chaos. All this chaos makes me yearn for the old Dr. Detroit days.
But what is wrong with D3 sports? What's wrong with just going to school, getting an education? To Van's point, to Fran and Seth's point a bit. why does everybody got to be in this rat race? I don't understand it.
Well, Ronnie, what you're saying is, no, you make a good point, but what you're saying is we're only going to have 60 to 75
Yeah.
schools playing, high major
Yeah.
season tournament basketball. Honestly, I mean, the days of the Cinderellas, as Seth pointed out, I didn't mind the fact that in the Sweet 16, probably most of the best 16 were still in it, but yet
I agree.
the country has always loved March Madness because of the occasional upset. Those days are going to be much fewer and far between because, for example, and Seth did this at Long Beach, I had teams at Manhattan College. There's no way those kids would have stayed 4 years, even though we had some Big East level players, because those kids would have been out the door after the first good year to the Big East. And so if that's what people want, that's what they're about to get over the next 10 years is 72 super conference teams.
Well, Ronnie, you raised a great point, Ronnie. But I think and you have a point. But the backside of that is what's wrong with it is all those teams that once offered kids scholarships. A lot of them that could not afford access to college without the athletic scholarship are not going to have scholarships. That's, I think, for me, the dilemma and the issue.
No, that's real, Dino. And look, I wouldn't have gone to college. Well, I would maybe try to. I caddied. I mean, I couldn't afford to go to college. Surely couldn't afford to go to Fairleigh Dickinson. I can tell you that much. So I mean, yeah, that's a concern. But you know what? With the way the portal is right now, and you run all your camps and everything, Dinos. How many young people are not being afforded the same opportunities they were, say, 10 years ago because everyone's playing trading places in the portal.
It's AAU.
Because that's what it is. It's trading places. It's what's going on.
It's actually AAU recruiting at the college level. It's stealing from each other. Yeah. Nobody wants to take a chance. I just had one of my kids just commit to Utah, Kendall Sanders, who had to go post-grad. And that was a kind of a typical situation because Utah has a brand new coach. I would assume he's got a 5-year contract or something like that. He can afford to take a high school kid right now. Most coaches who are on the hot seat can't afford that, who have to win right now to keep their jobs. So that's
the stupidity of college coaches today is they whatever it says, well, if I take a high school kid, he's not ready to play, he's going to transfer anyway. You got a year to develop a relationship with that guy. You got a year to show him how he can get better. You have a year if you can evaluate up. You have a year to invest in that guy, whether he's helping you win or not. You have a year to do something special. Now, look, if someone comes along and offers him a ton of money, that's one thing. But if you recruit the guy with the mindset of saying, you know what, here's where we see you. We see incredible potential in you. All right? Remember, you run my Long Beach teams, excluding Lucius Harris, every single player redshirted for me. Every single one. Every single guy that played for me at Long Beach State redshirted. We did that because we were playing against the Mormons, we were playing against Tark's team, and I needed to get older, and that was the mindset behind that. But it infuriates me when people say, well, we can't recruit a high school kid. Well, that's stupidity to me. Recruit a guy, develop him, invest in him, invest in the relationship. Now, if the guy gets really good after, you know what? Then you know what? You're going to lose him. But when people say, well, I'm not, why should I recruit a high school kid? Because you know what? I started 4 freshmen 2 different times at Virginia Tech. And this is before all this stuff was going on. But my first year at Virginia Tech, we started 4 freshmen. My 5th year at Virginia Tech, we started 4 freshmen. And my 9th year at Virginia Tech. And excluding my 9th year where we were 16 and 17, and they were really good, but we just weren't mature enough, and I did a shitty job. Those other 2 times, we won 8. We won 8-8 the first year of the ACC. My first year with that group, we went to the Big East tournament and won a game. And then next group, Malcolm Delaney's group, we were 10-6. You can win with freshmen. And those guys weren't McDonald's All-Americans. You got to just pour yourself into them. And I think everyone's using that as a cop-out. Hey, to me, I don't buy that.
It's a herd
mentality. You might not win a national championship, but I don't buy it.
Well, it's a copycat industry, so that makes sense. People copy success. But Seth, I want to ask you about that because you brought up a good point. And thinking about some of the college coaches you talk to, or Fran, when you're doing your notes, are guys getting, hey man, I'm getting disenchanted or burned out? Because like you said about Lucius, if Lucius comes along now, you built a relationship with Bobby Braswell. He was a great recruit for you. Well, now after a year, you're going to lose him to Kansas. He's going to go play with the Dinos, or you're going to lose him to UCLA.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
So how does a young coach or a guy keep, how do we build coaches if they're going to be like, hey, I'm doing a great job at this low level. I have a good eye for talent. Well, this kid's I'm making 115,000 or 150,000, and this guy's making $2 million now. What does that do to the industry?
Bonnie, it goes all the way back to why you did this show today.
Yeah.
NIL. If we can get some arms around NIL where we're not throwing out goofy money, okay? And there are some, guide rails, as they say, and we can kind of adjust the transfer portal, then kids can we can at least get some of our arms around the fact that, like, I lived this with a young man in my family. My son coaches at Harvard. They lost a kid last year to Georgetown. I know exactly how much he got. I know how that kid feels right now about why he transferred and wishes maybe.
I think he left, right, Fran? He left too. He left after 1 year at Georgetown. Did he not?
No, he hasn't left yet.
Oh, okay.
He hasn't left yet, and he may not leave. But all my point is, like, there might come a point in time where that young man, who really had the whole world by the tail for the next 50 years, decided that a couple 100,000 was critical right now for his family, as opposed to the Harvard degree. And by the way, he was a rock star last year. Seth, you hardly heard about him this year, right?
Except that just following, obviously, Ed Stevens.
Yeah, if you want to play a random game. But my point is, if we cannot make this goofy money out there, like the quarterback at Tennessee, or some of these kids getting $7-8 million to play at BYU, and kind of dial it back a little bit, where the kids, as Sonny always kind of felt like the kids needed to deserve some of this, granted, but not to the point where, as I said very early, you can't have unlimited free agency and no salary cap.
100%.
No way.
100%.
Well, if we can get that back to normal, then maybe we can keep somebody. Maybe Lucius Harris says, wait a minute, I'm not going to make a ton more at UCLA, and I'm averaging 18 a game at Long Beach for Seth, and I think my chances to get to the NBA might be as good or better. I'm not saying it's going to happen in every case. Seth, he probably you still might lose him.
Oh, yeah.
With a chance to keep him.
Well, and he ended up a 12-year NBA player. Those Russell and Lucius and James Cotton and Joaquin Hawkins. And why? Because they had a chance to play through their mistakes.
Well, Fran, excuse me, Seth. Fran, you just touched on some of the questions that people wanted me to submit to this show. Is like, should there be a cap on NIL money? Should the NIL money come with a 2-year contract where they have to stay, of course, unless the coach leaves or something?
Contract.
And the last one,
is important as heck. That's one of the things. You got to have something with some bite in it. Because
can we stop calling it NIL and call pay for play? Because that's what it is.
P2P.
is the biggest fraud.
Okay. And should the NCAA have to profit share with the player? And should there be a collective bargaining agreement?
Well, these guys might be smarter than me at this, but I've been told you can have a collective bargaining agreement and still not call them employees. Okay, now they're professional basketball players. We know that, okay? Whatever. They make more than G League guys, whatever. But if we can get a collective bargaining agreement with rules regarding buyouts, transfers, 1-year deals, 2-year deals, whatever you sign, the $150,000 buyout, maybe you pay that to, if you're playing at Middle Tennessee State and you sign at Tennessee with Rick Barnes, somebody pays the $150 back to Middle Tennessee so they can go buy another player.
That's exactly what.
Well, actually, one of the coaches for the SWAC schools just mentioned that recently, that buyout element, where maybe Seth brought it up earlier, but I just saw it recently. One of the SWAC head coaches was proposing that some type of buyout or compensation for the player leaving that school, leaving the coach that developed him, gave him the playing time, gave him the opportunity as well.
No, that's 100%, Dino. So there's got to, if we're going to do moving forward, there has to be figure out a way to have buyouts. And there's got to be a way, like I said before, to multi-year contracts, exactly what Franny was talking about. You can't have year-to-year free agency. No professional organization, if you want to call it professional organization, can survive year-to-year free agency. It would not work. And that is a must. And then we've got to find a way. And I know I'm being redundant because it makes me sick that we like literally these kids are on a college campus. They're taking online courses. They're just staying eligible. They're walking year to year to a different school. They're in school 5 and 6 years. They've had no mentorship because no one's built a bridge for them to cross. They have no degree. They have no one to help them get their first job. They have no one to help them navigate their first adversity
Well, how
away
about
from
the alumni?
basketball.
How about the alumni network? The time needed to build the alumni network.
Thanks. Yeah, and that's why a mentorship. Every you want one thing every school, no matter what the level, can have is a mentoring program and assign every player on that team with someone who's going to not give them money, but help them navigate this thing called life. Because everyone, and I use this all the time, I don't care who you are, what you do. For me, Terry Holland changed my life. All right, plain and simple. He changed my life. When I got to go Pitt, they hired me at Virginia. I say this all the time. I never made a major decision in my life, including ask my wife to marry me, without consulting Coach Holland. And everyone needs someone to invest in them without asking anything in return. And that's as important as anything we can do for these young people. All right. Besides their family, because quite honestly, the families are trying to monetize their kids right now. That's what they're trying to do. And a lot of them, because you know what, their kids have become their breadwinners. There are families that have left their jobs because their kids are getting paid this money. That's great. That money doesn't last forever.
He said that the Johnny Manziel mentality among these parents these days.
Yeah. Again, I don't know about Johnny Manziel, but I do know that the conversation I'm having, with parents are like, I shake my head and go, "What? Be a parent.
Yeah.
Be a parent. Be a parent. Love your kid. Have unconditional love."
Well, going back to Pat's point real quick, there is another person in Congress, Elisa McClain, the 4th ranking Republican from Michigan. She's got a bill introduced right now that will prevent college athletes from being classified as school employees.
So then what will they be classified as? What are they? What is she proposing? What are they?
Well, they can't be school employees. Can't collectively bargain, apparently.
Okay.
Well, the thing is, why would collective bargaining be any different for the kids than the NBA? Okay, NBA, the Players Association negotiates, but they don't work for the Players Association. They're a secondary organization that negotiates the contract and puts it back for a vote. Why couldn't it be done the same similar way in college basketball?
So
I don't see why. It's not an employee relationship.
Van, good idea or bad idea? Non-classification as an employee. Do we need that? Do we not need that?
I think the employee thing, I don't know enough about it, but like when you're dealing with employees, obviously now you're dealing with, taxes and disability, which may be fine. Maybe
Social Security.
Overtime, Social Security.
Yeah, and there's there's other factors being an employee that I think we're probably not thinking of. I'd hate to see that just because then there's no interest in getting a college degree. I think. I don't know. I don't know enough about the employee aspect.
Do we really need that as a solution to this issue right now? Do we need it?
Well, we need something.
We need to educate people what it is. To your point, Pat, and to your point, Dino, 95% of the people need to be, the scholarship is valuable. They need to learn the scholarship is valuable. Education's valuable. Having a network is as these former coaches say, having somebody rely on when you graduate to get a job. I mean, what's the difference between Long Beach State, and it's not to pick on Long Beach State, and USC's tuition? It's to have the network to get a job when they're done graduating. That's what you're paying for, to go there. And again, if you're not a scholarship athlete. So that's a tremendous value if you play football for Pete Carroll or John McKay. There's huge value there. People got to understand that. Though.
That's why what Seth said, you got to have a contract that spells out the relationship between the school and the player and the things that both of them have to live under. And academics can be part of that contract while they're at that institution. The buyout would be something that deters a little bit. You got to have a max on it to keep it going from crazy. Because I've heard some guys getting $2 million in basketball in the portal this year.
Oh, shoot, that's $2 million. Let me straighten this out. Like right now, a good 2 years ago, Fran, a good NIL budget, 2.5, 2 years ago.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
And last year, 5 million.
Yeah, and it's going up, obviously, this year.
Right now, all right. Right now, and you're speaking to guys all the time. You need between 10 and 11 million.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be unsustainable, which is another reason you need to get your arms around NIL with something organized, because, you know, Seth used the word donor fatigue. There's some schools out there that have unlimited budgets because they have billion-dollar donors, but most of even the power conference programs, I can tell you right now, there's a couple of programs in the Big 12 who didn't have great years, who you would think have unlimited resources, and they did not. And it showed. Yeah. So this money will dry up eventually if it's not organized in a way where we have the CBA, the contracts, all the things that the buyouts.
Hey, Fran, I got a question for you. What happens if all these boosters, they give, their team is 8th in the league, 9th in the league. Yeah. When they stop giving, then what? Then what happens?
Well, here's what's going to happen.
Coach gets fired.
Just said it. If I'm Joe Schmo and I'm Seth's booster at Virginia Tech and I give him $2 million and he's not playing the guys I think he should be playing, or the guy I bought and paid for, pay for play, I'm going to go to the AD and the president going, hey, get this guy out of here, man. I just gave Greenberg $2 million and they stink.
Yep.
So basically,
it becomes blue chips.
So what you're saying, Fran, basically we have boosters parading as NBA GM wannabes.
Yes.
It looks sounds
Absolutely.
Owners.
Absolutely. Yes. Not everywhere, but definitely.
They've always wanted to be that. It just didn't always work out that way in the game. Blue Chips, the movie, was real in the day that it came about. There were things like that going on.
That would be my next question to you, man.
It's even worse.
That'd be my next question to you.
Saban put it right, man. He said, you pay the wrong guys, you're blank out of luck.
I was at the Final Four, and I saw one, and he's a friend, one of the great college basketball recruiters / cheaters ever, and he's retired now. And I said, we need to go back to the old days. We knew you were cheating, so we didn't recruit your guys. We just recruited the guys that we thought we could get. It was a little simpler back then, and I'm exaggerating, obviously, because we do think the kids need some NIL money. But that was a simpler time and place than we have now. We have chaos. You said,
Van, to your point,
chaos.
It's now been since July 2021 where the NCAA was forced to institute NIL ability for the players because of state laws around the country. So we've had 3 or 4 years of learning how to manipulate this system, right? So to Pat's point, it's not completely going back in the bottle. And Van, to your point, is if they try to regulate it, guys, is just cheating going to go on again? That's the thing. Yeah. Because you're already teaching people how to do this and how to make money. It's not going to completely go back to 100% regulation. It sounds like it's just going to go. People are going to find a way to find loopholes and to pay the kids and to get the kids they want on their campus. So,
well, the worst you get, though, and Fran just brought it up, the worst you get is the guys who are going to do that are not going to be everybody.
Yeah, correct.
You're going to get the specific ones that will do it. And as Fran said, the guys that are doing it right and can give a guy $1 million, but he's doing it honestly, he's going to get his share of the kids that he can get. And they know they're not going to get those guys you can't touch. I mean, heck, I remember back 10 years ago when kids started asking for money to go to events.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. It's been, look, believe me, they were giving $250,000 out to the right player in 1979, okay? If it was the right player.
There were days when you had to pay for a home visit, not me.
Yeah, well, there were times you had to pay for a home visit, Fran. Come on. Don't go to Chicago now, son.
We weren't recruiting those guys.
Don't recruit Chicago.
Well, here's the simple thing. Oak Hill Academy, I did an event that honored Steve Smith about a month ago, and they're paying $50,000. They tell me to get a good high school guy to come to prep school, you got to pay him $50,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Seth, I always wonder why you never were affiliated with anybody from MLK High School in Chicago.
Yeah, we didn't. I'd rather go to Cleveland High School and everyone. Remember, I only had one guy in 9 years at Long Beach State. I only had one guy that was not from California, Rasul Salahuddin.
You were still in New York.
And the reason being is because, and I still say it's true. If you get the right dudes in the backyard and you develop them and you coach them, you can win. Every single guy we had, the furthest guy that we ever had was Mike Atkins, who was from Northern California, and Tony Clark was from San Diego in the other direction. Those are the two furthest guys that we had on our roster for 9 years.
And Pat, I want to answer your question to educate people of what you said is we're talking about the house settlement, the O'Bannon case. Pay for play is what it is the coaches and Van are saying online, but NIL is not going to completely disappear, to your point. If you're Cooper Flagg, you can be able to sign with New Balance. If you're Juju Watkins, that's not going away.
That's real NIL.
Well,
that's real. That's not going away because that's what NIL is.
Correct.
It's
I just
all
want
the
people
other
to be aware
stuff.
of what that is, and that's the ability for a kid to economically benefit from what he has is not going away.
Use his actual name, image, and likeness.
Yeah. That's just a small percentage of the people.
I know one little simple thing that can be corrected is being able to announce you're in the portal while you're still playing, like Scottie Pippen's son did for Michigan. They got to fix that.
Well, the portal opens up before the season's over.
Yeah. So
the portal's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months a year.
Well, actually, the NCAA should get the 7-Eleven to be a sponsor of the portal.
Well, we can go on and on, you guys, but we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We had a great show today. We'd like to thank our guest, Fran Fraschilla. We'd like to thank Seth Greenberg. We'd like to thank Van Coleman, who are here on the Zoom, and our in-studio guest, Ronnie Flores, my co-host, Dinos Trigonis, and myself, Patrick Pratt. This has been Hooked on Hoops, brought to you by Nothing But Net, and Triple Threat Collectibles, brought to you by Triple Threat Collectibles. All right, you guys. We'll see you next week right here. Thanks for watching.